Welcome back, guys. My name is Austin from awfulmedia.com, and this is part 2 of the inventory system tutorial in Unity 3D. In this part, we're going to start working on the actual inventory. And I do plan on, in this part, taking it quite slow, explaining everything that we have to do from this point until we finish. And then we're going to start working on our item class that we will use to define attributes for all of our items. That'll make sense here in a moment. Now, I had already recorded probably, I think it was 4 parts of this series already. I did this yesterday whenever I started the series. I uploaded the first part yesterday, and that everybody seemed to like it. But then I was going back through and editing the next few parts, and I just wasn't satisfied with the quality of the videos. Not the picture quality or the audio quality, but just me really in the videos. I wasn't satisfied with with my quality of commentary or teaching or whatever it may be. I wasn't liking it. So I thought the best thing to do was to restart it and to get it to a point where I'm satisfied with it, I'm happy with it, and I hope this will be that. If not, then I don't feel like doing it again, so this will have to do. Now, I did make a little list of stuff that we have to do, we have to complete. I probably left a few things out because there's just a lot of stuff to cover, and this isn't in any particular order. Well, kind of at first it is, but then I got off track and just started adding stuff, so there's no telling later on what order they'll be in, but for now, this is pretty much the order we'll go in. And keep in mind, when we're doing this, this is a pretty advanced thing. So if you are not familiar with C# in Unity, I would highly suggest you view my previous videos on the basics of that stuff. There's also a lot of other stuff out there. So if you don't like my stuff, that's fine. You can go watch somebody else or read or whatever you like to do. It's up to you. But make sure you have an understanding of arrays. Even though we won't be using arrays, we'll be using something that is very similar to an array. It's just more of a dynamic array. And make sure you understand how a for loop works. Those are very important for this system as well. So make sure you do understand both of those things well. I mean, obviously understand basic logical things like if statements and variables, stuff like that. But the key components are array, like, lists, and what did I say? For loops. So make sure you get those under your belt and come back here and pick it up and get going. But if you don't know that stuff, I highly suggest you check it out. So the first thing we have to do is create a way to define and store items, such as an item database. Now that means we're going to have an item class that contains all of the attributes for our items. What I mean by that is all of our items will have a name, they'll have a description, and they'll have some stats. They'll have an ID that we can, a unique ID that we can identify all these items by, and like a gold value, a strength value, a speed value, stuff like that. Whatever you want. I don't know what I'm going to add because I have no idea what direction I'm going with it yet, but whatever you want, you add in this class, and then you define these values whenever you create a new item. And we'll go over all of that, so don't worry about that. Create a way to add items to the player inventory, an inventory list. That is kind of the same thing, except we are transferring items from the item database to the player inventory. So these are two separate lists, okay? The one list contains all the items in the game, and the other list contains all the items that the player currently has. Very important to make that distinction, though. So anytime he gains an item, or he or she, I guess, anytime they gain an item, you would just add the item to the player's inventory list. And we'll go over that too. The next step to that, or for this, is to create a simple visual for the items in our player inventory. And we're going to be doing that by doing a simple display of text on screen to show the current items in our inventory. Just a stepping stone to get the inventory going a bit faster, right? So to show you a visual for the items instead of just taking my word for it. After that, we'll probably go on and generate a grid of slots that we'll use later on to display our inventory. So a grid of slots, if you think about a grid, you probably think, you know, it's not going to be anything special, but there's a neat technique that I want to show you by nesting a for loop within a for loop to generate a grid. And it's going to be kind of cool, and it may be a bit easier than you expect. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Be quite fun. And then we want to populate the slots of this grid with the inventory items. Okay, so going step by step, it really sounds like this is going to be a lot of work, and it is, but it's going to be a big payoff, I promise. We have the grid of slots, and then we're going to take all the items that we know the player has, go through and fill these slots in with these items. We also, now not in any particular order once we get down through here, because I have no idea how this is going to go, but we need to generate a system for displaying item information, and this would be something like a tooltip. When you hover over the item, it'll show you the name, the description, and the value for the stats and stuff like that. And I'm not sure if this is required for your particular inventory, but most inventories would require a way to check to see if the player has an item in their inventory. So you're doing a quest, and this guy, when you come back, he's like, "Oh, did you bring me my bowl that you were going to go find for some reason?" And he'll check your inventory to see if you have the bowl. If you do, then he'll remove the bowl from your inventory, right? So he has to be able to go through all the items in your inventory and find a particular item. So an item matching a specific ID. Need a way to do that. And then need a way to remove that item from the inventory. So a way to find the item and then take it from the player. Okay? So then need a way to use items. Not really need this. It's not a requirement for an inventory. But again, I want to go over the very basics that most people will be running into when they use an inventory. You usually want a way to use an item, right? And the way I think about that for now, at least, is a potion. You would, in this case, I'm going to be right-clicking to use a potion. So say you have a health potion and you're down to 20 out of 30 life. You right-click the health potion. It will remove the health potion from your inventory and give you, say, 5 life points. So you're at 25 out of 30. I also assume you may want a way to equip an item. And I'm not going to go into, well, maybe it depends if you guys want it or not. I don't think I'll go into showing like a 3D object on the player. I don't think I'll go into, well, I don't know, stats and stuff like that. It's completely up to your game. But I will show you how to equip an item. What I mean by that is I can right click a sword, and that sword will then apply its stats to something. It'll probably just store the sword in a variable. I could then go in later on and say my stats are whatever my player's base stats are, plus all the stats from the equipped weapon. And that's how you'd go about doing your stats. The next thing is very important, but also quite difficult to do, and it's probably the most difficult part about this whole thing is drag and drop rearranging of items in your inventory. This means I can go up here and click and drag an item, and this item will go from slot 2 to slot 7 depending on where I drop it. It sounds quite simple, but then you bring in item swapping and stuff like that, and you get a pretty complex system. It's going to be kind of fun to do though, because it's never going to be done the same way. You'll never find two games. I can not guarantee this though, I'm not going to say that, but I can almost assure you, you'll never find two games that handle this the same way. It will be handling it a different way than I have seen any game handle it before. So, I mean, it's not like it's a better way, and it's definitely not a better way. It's just a way. Okay, so that's all we have to cover, and it sounds like quite a lot, because it is. But we never get finished if we don't start. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Unity. And the first thing I'm going to do is work on that way that we can define items and store them in a database. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go into my assets folder. This is a brand new Unity project, by the way. I reset the windows and everything. All I did was slide this down over here and slide that down there. But it's a default window layout. in a brand new Unity project. So I'm going to go to a folder and I'm going to create a scripts folder. That's the only folder I can think of I need at the moment. So that's the only one I'm going to create. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new script file for C#. This is going to be item. Okay, now what this is going to hold is all the attributes for an item. So it's going to have the name, description, all that stuff I said. So I'm going to open this up. Eventually, maybe. Come on, Mono Develop, you can do it. Wow. Okay, okay. I hate Mono Develop more than anything, I think. I'm going to enlarge the font so you can actually see what's going on. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I don't need these methods. We're not going to be doing any logic. Well, we might make a constructor that we can, we may do that. I don't know. We'll see. So we don't need any of these updates, though, or any of these methods in here at all. Not required for us. That's because all this is going to contain for now is a few variables that we can assign stuff to later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start setting up these attributes, and the first one I'm going to have will be the name of the item. This will be a string, obviously, because it's text. It's going to be a short string of text. Now, I'm putting this at the top, though, because we're going to be adding these items to this list that we're going to create in the inspector. We may set up a constructor so we can do all this in code, too, and that might be something we'll actually cover. It won't take long. It'll give you a different way to add items instead of going in through the inspector. But one thing we need to do is make sure the name's at the top so that our list item is the name of our item. And that'll make sense when I show you the inspector. So I want to do a public, make sure they're all public because we have to access these from the inspector. And that makes them available to us. If they're private or they don't have an access modifier, that means they default to private, and that's not good for us. So I'm going to do public, it's a string, which is a string of text, and I want to call an item name. You could just say name, whatever, but I want to keep it consistent all the way down using item. The next one I want to do is a public integer. This is going to be the item ID, okay? So I want to have it where, I'm not going to make it auto increment, but we will have it go from 0 to however many items we have. That way, when I want to add an item to our inventory, I can just say add item 5. And we'll find the item that has the item ID of 5 and add it to our inventory. Okay, so it's not going to be add item with name bronze sword, which you could do. Wouldn't be too hard to do, but I prefer this method. The next thing I want is a public, let's see, we'll do a public string for item description, DESC. For short. The next thing I want, what do I want? Oh, we need an item icon. Okay, so you know you're going to have a visual display of the item in your inventory, and it would be an icon, something like a sword icon or something like that. And that'll be a public texture 2D. This is, as it sounds, a 2D texture that we can draw in GUI space. We can draw it within our user interface of our game, I guess. So a texture 2D, we can just assign it a PNG or a JPEG or something like that, and that's what we need. So that's exactly what we need. So an item icon for the name. The next thing we need is, I'll just give it a couple stats so we can play with those. Public int, and I'll call it power, and then public int, and we'll call this, I don't know. Public int speed, like attack speed. I'm going to keep item in front of this though, so item power, and then item speed. So there we go. Now, we need one more piece of information. That information is, what is this item? Is this item a weapon? Is it a consumable? Is it for a quest? I don't know. So the way I can do that, the way I can set that is I could set it as a string and then every time type in it's a weapon, it's a consumable. Or I can create my own selection of data or my own selection of data types that I can access in the inspector and only select from a select few of items. Instead of being able to type anything I could possibly type, and most likely get it wrong when I try to add an item, I could just set up my own selection. And the way I would do that is with an enum, enum, and I would give it the type, or the name. We'll do item type. I think that's makes sense. It has to be public as well. And this is a bit different than what we've done before because we're defining a type. We're not setting a variable here. We're defining a type that will then create a variable of. Okay, so item type would be like something like a weapon or a consumable, or what did I say? A quest item, so quest. So we just have 3 types for now. Add whatever you want. It's completely up to you. All this is completely based on your game. Now, we have this new type here. But what does that mean exactly? It doesn't look like it's going to do anything like that. So I would do public item type. And look at this. See item type right there? It is now its own type, right? So I can go there, and then I can give it a name, and I would say item type. Notice it's lowercase starting out here. This, it's typical and convention to uppercase the first letter of a type or a class, and lowercase the first letter of a label for a variable or something like that. So make sure you keep that in mind. I couldn't say item type uppercase and then keep that uppercase too, because then you have interference between these two. We wouldn't know what you're referring to. So make sure they are different. I mean, this could just say type, but that doesn't go with my item convention I'm using here. Okay, so I do like the item type like that. But that's great, but what does that do for us? So now what I can do is I can create an object in the world. Let me just show this to you. Notice this is not going to be attached to anything. This public class does not have to be on an object. It's just going to be a class that we reference when, say we want to create a new item. Then we would create an instance of the item class. We would call the constructor and say it has this name, this description, this ID, and then add that to the database. But we're going to be doing all that through the inspector in Unity instead of doing it all through code. I will probably show you how to do it in code as well, just so you understand both ways. But the easiest way to do it if you're working in Unity is just keep it all in the inspector. Don't worry about calling the constructor yourself through whatever class you would do that, whatever you want to set it up for. So I'm going to go game object, create empty, and I'm going to call this item database. Okay? Now I'm going to go back down here and I'm going to right click and go create a C# script. This is going to be called, we'll call it item database. I'm going to open this up. Now item database, we won't be needing any of the methods either. And really quick, I did forget to do something. In our item class, we are going to need to access, no, I'll just show you. I'll show you these. I'll show you this as an issue and then show you how to fix it. That'd be best, I think. So we have to use a data type in our item database. It's a data type we've not used before, but I've talked about it quite a few times. And that is list. L-I-S-T, just list. It is a dynamic array. Think of it like that. An array you have to know the length of. So you have an array and there's going to be 5 spaces in this array. It's going to go from 0 to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So you have to know that when you initialize this array. You can't just say it has 4 and then later on add 1 to it, making it 5. You can't just tack it on to the end, right? You have to set the index to be equal to something. Not with a list, though. A list, I can say, let's see, I could say, well, I'm just thinking about something else here, but I'm trying to think. We could use arrays, I think, but, well, no, we'll do add. We're going to be using add for the list. That'd be the best way, I think. So with a list, what I could do is, say I have 2 items in a list, and the length of the list doesn't matter. It doesn't have a set length, but I do have 0 and 1 indexes filled with something, and then there's nothing else after that. Well, I could come in and say add. Just go through the list and say dot add, and add any data type that matches the list type, and it will just tack it on to the end. You can do that as many times as you want to, whatever the limit of the list is, but it's something we'll never have to worry about. You can do that without having to update the length of the list. And then you can count the items in the list and still have an idea of how many items are in the list, which is very important for us. The first thing I need to do, though, is to use this list. You have to understand that it is from the generic namespace, okay? So here we have the system.collections namespace, which gives us access to a few things. But we don't have to worry about that right now. What we need is to be using system.collections. So we're going through the collections namespace again, but what we're doing is going a bit deeper than that and a bit less broad than just collections. We're saying I want generics from collections. And this gives us access to list, which is very important. So this will be public because we're accessing it from the inspector. And list is defined with list. Now, what is a generic? It is pretty much just a way, it gives you access to data types that you can set a data type for. Okay, so what I mean by that is list. So I have access to these two brackets right here where I can define the type of data that will be stored within this list. And what that means is instead of saying like int list, and that's obviously going to have an issue, int list, and then just have that, what I could do is say, or what I have to do is say int list of int. And you don't see much benefit there, but what I will be doing is I will be saying item, okay? So list of item types. Notice our item class here. The only reason we have access to that is because of item, okay? And then I will give it a name, so I will now name this list. It would be just items, I guess. That sounds good. You don't have to match anything, make it whatever you want to. And then I'm going to just instantiate or initialize this with a new list, as list is a class, so we're going to just do it just like that. Make sure I pass item through that one as well. So as list is a class, in object-oriented programming we have to create an instance of the class to use it like we're doing here. So what I'm doing is saying items is equal to a new list of item. Okay? What I was going to show you earlier, before I said I'll just show you the issue, is that when I go to item here, what I have to do is say that these properties within our item class are serializable, okay? So they have to be displayed. We're going to be working in the inspector, and I want these properties to be displayed individually so I can update them for each one. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, so if I go to my item database, I'm going to attach my item database class to that. And you'll see a items field with a drop down where I can set the size. This will be the count of items in our database. So I would say I want 5 items. I then get element 0 through 4. But I have a single field for each item where I can then, select a field and then add the item there that way or whatever. That doesn't make any sense. But what I want is I want the ability to go into each one of these and say element 0 is a rusty sword that has a description of this and an icon of this. Each one I want to be able to do that for. So we have a way to manage our item database. So what I can do is I will go into item here and I will say a system, go through the system namespace once again, and I will say system dot, what was it? Serializable. That's a tough word for me for some reason. And that will be fine. But I am inheriting here from mono behavior, and this just needs to inherit from the system.object, which would be default to most classes. So I can just take that away, and that will give us access to what we need here. So if I hit Control S, come into Unity, this should be fine for us. Yeah, reset that. I'll do 5. Notice now I have element 0 through 4 once again, but next to these I have a little drop down arrow. And I drop it down and look what I get. Look at that. That's cool, right? So now for each item I can give it an item name, an ID, a description, and all this stuff. And notice my enum, which we set up as a public variable, I now have access to all the values that I set, but only the values that I set. So I can't set any value that doesn't exist. So we can always check, because we can check for specific item types because we know the items that exist, or the item types that exist. I sound really excited about this because I am. I don't know why. And that's all there is to that. So now to add items to our database, I would say this is a bronze sword for whatever reason. First thing came to my mind. It is the first item, so it is 0. Item description is a sword that is made of bronze. Very exciting description. And I would give it, I need a period there. I would give it an icon as a texture 2D there, and then a power of 2 and a speed of 1, and it is a weapon. And now we have our first item, right? I don't have an icon, but that's fine. I'll get an item icon when I get those icons that I showed you in the previous tutorial, or the previous video, wasn't really a tutorial. So that is that. Now I can use this information, all these items that we can create here, and then go through them and add the ones I want to my inventory. However you want to do that. If you have a loot system or whatever, that's fine. But you would always go from an item database, finding the items you want, and adding them to your other list, which would be your inventory list. And we'll get into that in the next part. Oh, a cliffhanger. That's great. So thank you for watching. It would help me out a lot if you guys would leave a like and a comment on this video. If you did learn something, let me know about it. That'd be great to hear. Follow me on Twitter at AwfulMedia. Follow me on Google Plus if you wish. Subscribe if you want to see more of this. And stick around for part 3, where we will get into our inventory part, right? So thank you for watching once again. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.